Kia ora koutou. My name, as some of you will know, is Gareth Morgan. I was born and raised in Pataru, South Waikato, by my mother and father, Mary and Roderick, who came from Cardiff in South Wales. My wife is Joanne. Together we have 4 children, 6 grandchildren. Having been born and bred in Pataru, my mountain is Maori and my river is Te Waiha, which ran beside our place. Unfortunately, I have to say, it was a lot more pristine then than it is now. I've had direct experience over recent years of how important mountains and rivers are to Maori, having been engaged with the marae of South Waikato on the future of Maori as an ecological reserve, and with the Ruakawa iwi in trying to prevent the blue springs on my river being despoiled by masses of tourists swimming in them. I'd like to begin by extending my condolences to Piri, the Secretary of Ratana, for the recent passing of his mother. 25th of January, of course, is the birthday of T.W. Ratana, and let's not forget that's actually why we're here. I wish to thank the people of Ratana for welcoming me again onto your whenua. I was here 2 summers ago when I was on the one hand given the honour of sitting on the paipai on the day the politicians came to Ratana, but on the other was presented with the gifts that Ratana presented Michael Joseph Savage of the petition, the broken watch, the feather, the punamu and the potato. Of course, the symbolism of that resonated, and I remember the challenge you laid down to me that day to progress the Ratana petition and to get politicians to accept the treaty principles as central to the Constitution of New Zealand. Well, I'm back 2 years on to report progress, as well as to return my own challenge to Maori assembled here today. Of course, this time I come having now formed the Opportunities Political Party, so my proposition is somewhat more than academic relevance. Last time we met, I just completed the book on the future of the Treaty of Waitangi. This time I want to outline my political plan to give effect to some of the suggestions in that book. Our book was called Are We There Yet? In reference to the strong expectation held by Pākehā particularly that once the settlement process winds up, then for all intents and purposes the claims are finished and we can all get back to normal, happy in the knowledge that everything to do with the treaty is now done and dusted. As I said in 2015, I don't have to tell this audience that nothing could be further from the truth. The enormity of the task in convincing ordinary non-Maori, as often is referred to in Te Reo as tauiwi, that the treaty means far more than reaching agreed settlements over past wrongs. This task needn't be so daunting if successive governments had done a better job committing to tauiwi the work of the courts and the tribunal over the last 40 years. So much remains to be done if Maori are to make meaningful progress on the issues around rangatiratanga as referred to in Article 2 of the treaty. Self-determination, removal of socio-economic disadvantage and gaining a meaningful say in the governance of Aotearoa New Zealand all remain on the to-do list. And I do not need to tell you that most tauiwi are blissfully unaware of this. This is the challenge my political party is prepared to take directly to Pākehā and to work assiduously to ensure that in the end, all New Zealanders get it. In 1936, Michael Joseph Savage said, "I will give the Treaty of Waitangi every consideration and listen to your representations, and I will say that the spirit of the treaty can be found in our policy to assist you and all your Maori people." It is notable that no Prime Minister since Michael Joseph Savage has continued the undertaking of a statement made in 1936. Our research suggests, 1, your language remains marginalised, although pleasingly wider acknowledgement of its importance and value to us all is emerging. 2, your overrepresentation amongst the ranks of the socially and economically disadvantaged is unacceptable on any measure. 3, My view is that the trinkets of political office you are gaining are an extremely poor substitute for the principle of a shared role in governance. The Opportunities Party is soon to announce a program of constitutional reform. The following are those elements of that reform which are centred around the Treaty of Waitangi. Firstly, an upper house. An upper house would in effect restore the sovereignty of Parliament and take sovereignty back from the Cabinet. Typically in Western democracies, the upper house is not sovereign, it can only recommend, but in so doing, it highlights to the public the risks that proposed legislation poses. It is better we find out before the damage is done. The second part of that reform is a written constitution. We're committed to that. Apart from New Zealand, Israel and the UK, all other democratic countries have a written constitution. Why do we need one? Because ordinary people want a central reference in plain English and in plain te reo that summarises what the values of our community are. It will be a reference for all New Zealanders to identify with, take pride in, defend the principles of and live our lives by. Central to ours will of course be the Bill of Rights and our Human Rights Act, but as well we want included those issues that are distinctly New Zealand. There's two of them. First one is obligations under the Treaty of Waitangi. Second one is the constitutional rights of nature, wherein our ecosystems have the right to exist and flourish. Honouring the treaty should be central to the unique identity of being a New Zealander. Don Brash and Winston Peters, take note. The document that defines New Zealand democracy, our constitution, needs to acknowledge the unique rights that Maori have in terms of the right for its society to be protected, as well as its role in the determination of our country's future. That is the only way that the treaty can said to be being honoured. This then is the second reason for bringing in an upper house. It will not only restore sovereignty to Parliament, take it off the Cabinet, but it will defend our constitution, which has at its centre the Treaty of Waitangi. Equipping citizens to respect the role of the treaty. As I've said, there still prevails an urban myth amongst Pākehā that aligns with the fiscal envelope concept. In other words, after the settlements end, the treaty becomes irrelevant. And nothing could be further from the truth. It is vital that young New Zealanders continue to grow up with a far stronger appreciation of the treaty's importance than has been common in the past. It is to the credit of our education system that major efforts are being made in this regard through the schools. However, the treaty is of such importance that it behoves us to ensure that all New Zealanders feel the importance in their hearts, respect it and nurture the principles of the treaty. To ensure New Zealanders forever empathise with our bicultural foundations, Te Reo Maori, the other official language of our country, needs to be afforded the same rights as English. That includes the requirement that it be taught in all schools. To quote Nelson Mandela, when explaining why he had learned Afrikaans, the language of his prison guards, if you talk to a man in a language he understands, that goes to his head. If you talk to him in his language, that goes to his heart. My dream would be that the two treaty signatories are equally represented in the upper house, which, while deferring to the sovereignty of Parliament, the lower house, has the ability to highlight to the public weaknesses in intended legislation, as well as the ability to refer to the courts issues of constitutional breaches. With the Constitution firmly including the principles of the treaty, this should ensure the interests of both tangata whenua and the other societies that make up the New Zealanders are protected and nurtured. Finally, I come to two challenges the Opportunities Party would like Maori to consider. First, we want and need your party vote. We are the one party that is prepared to take this treaty conversation to non-Maori and convince them that honouring the treaty is a win-win. We are the one party that will push for a written constitution with honouring the treaty hard-coded in it. We are the one party who wants an upper house with Maori appropriately represented in it so that democracy Kiwi style is defined. Neither of the establishment parties will do this, neither will renew the commitment that Michael Joseph Savage made to Ratana in 1936. On behalf of TOP, I'm making that commitment, but for us to fulfil it, we need to be in Parliament, and in decent numbers. That's why we need your help. We need your party vote. My second challenge is to implore you to call out the New Zealand First Party of Winston Peters. I do not see that party as at all empathetic to the treaty. Indeed, Winston regards honouring it as separatism and Maori privilege. As a man I greatly admire, Moana Jackson, has said, any treaty is an agreement by separate parties, so of course it's about separate entities agreeing to coexist and have a duty of care to each other. It is a two-way street, not a one-way track to cultural oblivion that Mr. Peters supports. His Cheshire cat grin cannot hide the fact that New Zealand First is selling Maori down the river. Indeed, when I read Winston's utterings in this area, as in many areas, all I see are the words of Don Brash. The two are black and white facsimiles of each other. Both were aggressive conservatives who preach assimilation and subjugation to a British settler form of monocultural white nationalism. Surely this is evident when the newly formed Hobson Group, led by Don Brash, publicly elected New Zealand First as the only party who represent their views. You need to remember that it was Mr. Peters who championed the Treaty of Waitangi Principles Deletion Bill in 2005. That bill was to remove all treaty principles from legislation. It seems to me that Peters gets away with this anti-treaty stuff because he is Maori. The old adage that you can't be racist against your own race, I don't accept that excuse. Winston has no empathy with the situation Maori finds itself in, overrepresented in all the wrong economic and social indicators precisely because of the lack of recognition of its cultural values in taonga. I cannot understand why Maori don't stand up and call Winston out for being nothing more than an Uncle Tom, an envoy of the Kiwi not iwi fringe. In no way is it in Maori's interest to support the vicious phobic undertone in New Zealand First. You need to deal to him. So there you have it. I am trying as much as possible to do the best thing by both Pākehā and Maori to take our treaty forward, to have the treaty honoured just as the Ratana movement implored Michael Joseph Savage. This is the challenge you laid down to me 2 years ago. I cannot do this without your help. You need to renounce New Zealand First as being anti-treaty and therefore anti-Maori, and the Opportunities Party must have your party vote so we can work with the Maori electorate MPs to achieve our objectives with the treaty. Thanks very much, kia ora.